This episode is brought to you by Rad Dudes Who Love Nature.
We were beating a new pub crawl book, and so I was pretty happy about that. More people cared about nature than about pub crawling, at least for a few weeks there.
You are listening to Urban Wildlife Podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of the Urban Wildlife Podcast. We've got both of our co-hosts, Billy Brown and
Tony Crosdale. It's been a while.
And we're going to have a relatively informal chat today about both of our book projects. A little bit of an update. So as usual, you can email us at urbanwildlifecast@gmail.com. We are not so active on Twitter these days, but that's still an account on my phone somewhere. So you can hit us up at Urban Wildlife Cast, and that will ding me if you send us a message. Of course, you can find us on Facebook and comment on things there. So yeah. And also, of course, rate us highly on your podcast listening app of choice. Leave comments. Let us know how we're doing. Send us ideas. And without too much further ado, welcome back to the mic, Tony.
Hey, it's been a while. It's too long, but I'm looking forward to getting back in the groove. I think the between my band's album, recording that and dealing with all that, and then which is, by the way, which should be out the fall. It hasn't been officially announced yet. The label will announce it when it's closer to the release date, because they release a couple singles and stuff. So it's a whole thing, but it'll be out in the fall. But I think between that and
for people who don't know, what's the band and what's the album?
The band is called Rambo. I'm not going to say anything about what the album is until just that we have an album coming out.
What does Rambo stand for, Tony?
Well, I'm not going to. It's going to be different on this record, so I'm not going to tell anybody. In fact, I don't even know if I'm going to tell anybody the album's coming out at all. But I don't know what the crossover is. But yeah, so it is. We have a label. It will release in the fall, and then the details will follow. I have to respect their wishes. Yeah. So there's that, and yeah, I have a 2-year-old.
So you got the album coming out with Rambo.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have children, and children they require a certain amount of time and effort.
And and honestly, require a certain amount of time and effort, and also there's nothing really I'd rather do. I don't. I wonder what it would have been like having a kid when I was a bit younger. Part of me laments having a kid in my early 40s mid 40s, I guess. Because I'm so much older than her. Compared, my dad was 26 when I was born. I was 44 when my daughter was born. And I hope I don't die too soon for her and make her really sad.
But, I hope so too.
So I think about that, but a 26-year-old in 1976 was a lot different than a 26-year-old in 2022 in terms of like where your life is at and secure. My parents owned a home for a couple of years already, my dad had his job for his career for 7 years when he had me. You know what I mean? Like I now just, I had my job my career job for only 5 years before I had my daughter. So, and I was 44. So, I think you're in a lot of different place and you're kind of just, I've already been to 50 some countries. So been to, band, traveled the world, did a bunch of cool, crazy shit, so I'm not really like, there's nothing really I'd rather do than spend time with my daughter. It would have been different if I was a bit younger and hadn't done as much and experienced as much life. So I'm kind of just content. I kind of don't want to miss the next adorable, hilarious thing she says, and also because of my ADHD, I'm often not present mentally as much as I like to be. So at least I like to be present physically as much as I can,
Half the battle. Yeah. Awesome. And so you go first. You've got something we've been, and to me, this doesn't feel like news because Tony and I and a few other people have been emailing about Tony's idea for a book, but it is something you've been shopping around. You got a few little bites. I mean, nothing, maybe not enough to
Yeah.
say it's in the bag.
I mean, I don't know. It's not
project.
really. I'm kind of nervous. Like, should I even talk about it? Because what if my idea gets swept? But I have an idea to do a field guide to the urban wildlife of the world, and I have artists. I have a whole proposal that I've been shopping around. I have sample chapters. I have sample plates. I have a whole outline. My idea is to have a book that you could step off a plane anywhere in the world and immediately start identifying almost every terrestrial vertebrate that you'll see. Because I think that from my own experiences and looking into, iNaturalist and eBird and things for places I haven't been to and the places I have been to, I think it's doable. And I think that a lot of naturalists who are traveling for whatever reason, when they're in it, they find themselves in cities. And like, for instance, if you're doing a guided tour somewhere, you often are going to have time in the city before and after your tour starts, wherever it leaves from, right? Because you don't just fly into the Amazon, you fly into like Sao Paulo and then take a small flight to like Manaus or whatever else. And, and even that city, you might want to walk, like you definitely go, you land, in a big city and maybe take a flight to a smaller city and then go from there. Right. So like,
Right.
If you want to check out those cities, like there's wildlife there to see. And you might not have a field guide that covers that with you. You might be expecting you're going to go somewhere where a guide is going to tell you everything that's there. You might be a birder and not know that much about other taxa, or you might be a herper and not know that much about birds. And like, you don't necessarily want to bring a field guide. You may have a layover in a country that that's like, you might have a 12-hour layer, especially if you're going to some pretty remote places, pretty, like places that people don't go to that often. You can't just take a direct flight there. You might have to take several flights, and often they're not timed perfectly. So this would be, you might, if you want to, look around a city that you're not planning that your tour isn't actually going to, or your expedition for that matter, or whatever you're doing, it's just something that you can have. Or say you travel for work or whatnot, and it's just a book you can have and immediately like start identifying wildlife wherever you may be. Because I think that, there's a class of wildlife that's like ubiquitous. Like either the wildlife itself is like, for instance, like a peregrine falcon, they adapt to cities all over the world, right? And they've got their own power, right? Or like, Mediterranean house gecko is a species that has been introduced all over the world, mostly probably by accident. So, but there's a suite of species that are ubiquitous around the world in cities. And we'll cover that. But then also each region has wildlife that has adapted to the cities that's unique. And I think that, we can basically cover that. And also it'll give you some clues and some tips onto how to observe wildlife. What are the places? There's some places that tend to be always good to see wildlife. Like some kind, like I was saying, like sewage treatment plants or airports or drainage ditches, like things that like, kind of like universal.
I've noticed as we've researched stuff for the podcast that just so many cities are on water, which is sort of a basic way that cities have developed over the centuries. And then so many cities on water have some waterfront park.
But yeah, I mean, for instance, one of the sample places was the city of Balikpapan in Indonesia, Borneo, Kalimantan. And I mean, their waterfront area literally has like proboscis monkeys, and like Irrawaddy dolphins, like that's, and I was talking, I'm going to talk to the guys from Naturally Adventurous, because they've been doing their top 5 habitats the top 5 like of each region. And I want to do the top 5 urban habitats with them. And one of the ones I wrote down was the mangrove marina. Where like there's often waterfront park, like you're saying, but often there's like a boardwalk through mangroves, or just like an area where the mangroves will come. You have access to, often some of your best access to mangroves are actually in urban areas. Where you can get because there's an infrastructure, just like by accident that gives you access to mangroves, where you can see like rails walking amongst the prop roots, or like mangrove pitta.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, Miami, like one of the best places to see like mangrove cuckoo is like a marina, and like American crocodiles right in the marinas, where there's mangroves. It's just like a very it's a one of the best places. It's also like one of my favorite cities for urban wildlife is Cairns in Northern Australia. And they have 2 spots. One's like a mangrove area, and there's like a little boardwalk through it and whatnot. And then there's like a mud flats right along like this esplanade, which is one of the best places to watch shorebirds. I think it's the best place to watch shorebirds in Australia, and one of the greatest places to watch shorebirds in the world. And it's Australia, so everybody's really attractive. So you're like, there's like these unbelievably attractive people like jogging, and then like like a bunch of cool shorebirds and like on mud flats, and then of course there's just like fig birds and parrots, and double-eyed fig parrot for that matter, and like all these honey eaters, just like mangrove whistler or whatever. And it was all right there in the city. So yeah, so I'm trying to I feel like there's a niche. I've had a couple bites. We'll see if anything happens. But if any publishers are out there, hey, give us a holler. Billy will be an editor and an author for this book too. So
awesome. And you've got me looking up what the heck is a double-eyed fig parrot. It's gorgeous. It has like kind of the look of an Amazon, like with the red on the front.
Yeah, but they're tiny. They're like the size of like a house sparrow or something. And while Amazon is like a size of like a pigeon or a crow. Sure. So I mean, Billy actually has a book. So we should really focus on your actual book that is like, I literally, I'm in my naturalist / James Bond / playroom, because I have a kid and now every room is a playroom, lair, and in one of the bookshelves is Billy's book.
Which is fun. I don't know if I've talked about it on the podcast much, but basically, a few years ago, and I think it was actually spring of 2019. I remember this because having a conversation. I've been writing for many years for a local Philly magazine called Grid, and I still do. It's a local sustainability magazine. I've written about like urban natural history topics, but more and more in other types of environmental writing, and now more in a lot of feature and investigative stuff as well. But it's been my writing home for a long time. And I've been talking to the editor about the idea of getting an anthology together of essays that I'd done or columns I'd done for Grid. I was chatting with another naturalist in Philly named Ann Becker, who's one of the sharpest, one of these people who like in Philly, I guess anywhere, but who knows, as I put it once when I was talking about it, like who knows fungi and moths. And so I was like right there, plus the sharp birder and just knows like everything else too. But to me, someone who knows their moths, and knows their moths.
Anne is like, she's one of those people that knows a whole lot about a whole bunch of stuff, but she knows like a little bit about everything else too. At least one of those folks.
Even the obscure stuff. It's amazing. But in any case, she was on a nature walk. I was leading for the City Nature Challenge in 2019 at a really neat spot called Fort Mifflin in Philadelphia, which is like this historic site, but it's this old fort that's on the tidal Delaware and has like this moat, which is like this great tidal wetland. It's just like, to me, like one of the underrated nature spots in Philly. But we were doing a walk there, and she had mentioned that she was working on a book, and I was like, hey, can I talk to your editor? And so she put me in touch with folks at Temple University Press. Temple University is a major public university in Philly, and they have the university press. And so I talked to them, and they were like, "Yeah, we don't know about the whole anthology thing." They weren't so into reprinting stuff that had been printed before, but they said, "Hey, do you want to do an activity guide?" I said, "Sure," because it's basically, I think it's a neat idea, but also is for someone like me is pretty easy in the sense that for 10 odd years I've been writing about nature in Philadelphia, 12 times a month, 12 times a year. And that meant I already knew, like off the top of my head, I could rattle off a whole ton of different activities one could do and phenomena one could try to focus in on in the Philly area. And so it was a lot of fun to write. I was talking to someone recently about what research I did, and I'm like, I didn't do a ton of research. Like I sort of, a lot of it was off the top of my head, then checking stuff with contacts and friends at different organizations in the area. I was joking. I said that the one thing I did research for in terms of like physical, well, I did a lot of dragging my kids out and making them do activities with me, just to double check things that I remember doing once, like, 10 years before. But I also, one time I remember our buddy Robin Irisari had texted a bunch of us about watching Nighthawks at a Phillies game. Phillies are a local baseball team. And I like Nighthawks a lot. I thought that was really neat. Like the biggest piece of like me going out and trying an activity to research it was me going to a Phillies game with Robin and like watching birds. And we didn't see any Nighthawks, and the Phillies lost. But I think being a Phillies fan, that you learn how to roll with disappointment, which is the same as true as being a naturalist. Like there are plenty of times, as a my core is as a herper, right? You go out and looking for some snake or turtle. Like the weather conditions are perfect, you're in a good spot, and you just don't see them, to get skunked, and it's like that's life. But it was still enough for me to validate the activity and do research, right? So it was a lot of fun to write. I could just sort of write like another. The way we arranged it was with 52 different activities, kind of like one for each week of the year, so arranged seasonally. And I think I got a lot of obvious things in there, like, for me, obvious urban activity is looking for small snakes that manage to hang on in the city, like brown snakes, which means just going into gardens, looking under stuff, which I like to say is one of the best things you can do with kids, is just go into gardens or go into, if it's a safe place, go into vacant lots, what have you, and look under stuff. And like, it's one of these things where you might not find the critter you're looking for. Like you might not find brown snakes, but you're going to find crickets, and you're going to find worms, and you're going to find ants, and you're going to find beetles. And so it's just like a really fun thing to do with kids, because, the kids might not be at all disappointed that you're not finding like the thing you were looking for, because they're finding 10 other things that they think are really cool. And so there's those kinds of activities. Maybe some of the obvious birding kinds of activities, like making sure you observe winter waterfowl when they're in our waterways and ponds and parks and stuff like that. Making sure you watch, spring migration if you can catch it in the park near you. Plenty of raptors that are fun and big and easy to observe around cities, whether that's like red-tailed hawks in North American cities or peregrine falcons, which I guess could be in cities around the world. And then, some quirkier things that reflect my own experiences. And we picked for the cover an activity called squirrel fishing, which, I think I once put audio of that on the podcast. But this is something I found on YouTube once when I was writing an article about squirrels for Grid. And the idea of it is that you take a fishing rod, and I recommend a setup for relatively stiff setup with heavy line. But in any case, you're tying your line around an unshelled peanut, right? And you're finding a place where there's squirrels that are already pretty habituated to eating handouts from people. And so you cast your peanut out there, and your goal is to get the squirrel off the ground. Because what happens is that, the squirrel sees the peanut, squirrel wants to take the peanut, chew it open, get the kernels inside. But squirrels, you might think that the squirrel might be like freaked out that the peanut is somehow come to life and it's fighting back. But in reality, what the squirrel does is it immediately figures out what you're doing. It's like squirrels will make eye contact. The squirrels will make eye contact with you while they are holding onto this peanut and chewing into it. And so while you're trying to pull it off the ground, the squirrel is like first. Squirrel, I find like peanut number 1, they chew through the peanut. Like peanut number 2 or 3, they figure it out and they just chew through the line and just cut the line and run away with the peanut. And so it's a fun way to mess with squirrels. Gray squirrels in North America at least, and probably in the UK, are animals you shouldn't have to feel too bad about messing with. I mean, they get by pretty well. They get some food out of the mix, and they're just like smart. Interesting animals to play with. And so that's an activity that like I don't know that everyone would have put it in there. We got that on the cover. A friend of mine named Samantha Whitgen, who's a great artist or graphic designer, engineer, jack of many trades, awesome person, wrote a lot in Grid actually over the years about recycling. And she did the illustrations and the design work. It definitely was important for me to use photos of local stuff. So I sort of went to, so all the pictures are either stuff that I took, and I'm not the best photographer out there, so it's not a ton of stuff that I took, but a lot is from photographers in the Philly area. So like you mentioned Ann Becker, she's got some pictures in there. Christian Hunold, who's a local political scientist, but also keen wildlife observer, great wildlife photographer, has been on the podcast a few times talking about rats and other things like that. Christian's got a lot of pictures in there. So it was a fun place to showcase some of the talents of our local, our local nature community, And so, yeah, it was a lot of fun to write. It's out. I got an email from the publisher saying after a few weeks that it was the number 1 new release in Philly travel on Amazon. And of course I was like, well, how many are in that category? But we were beating a new pub crawl book. And so I was pretty happy about that. More people cared about nature than about pub crawling, at least for a few weeks there. But yeah, if you do want to get it, go get it. It's on, your big booksellers like Amazon and Barnes Noble, Temple University Press. You can get it straight from them. We're hoping that it'll pop up in more local Philly bookshops. So I could send people to some local businesses to get it. There's an e-book version too.
Yeah, and the thing is about this book is, in fact, I think we should talk about you doing a universal one, and I would be very happy to help you do that. But I think a lot of this book is, I'd say at least half of the book could be applied universally. Is not just to Philly. It's just a great idea to do in nature anywhere in the city, or just in general, not just Philly,
Yeah, and I think especially if you get into like just our continent, Eastern North America. But yeah, I think anywhere you are, and this is one of the things when you get into nature activities, is that like, picking flowers and pressing them and then doing some artwork with them. You can do it anywhere in the world, and people doing it everywhere in the world for centuries, right? It's like, I feel like it's one of these things, like with so many activities, the Japanese have taken it to like a certain artistic refinement that can either be awesome or absurd depending how you look at it. But yeah, so it's like around the world, people press flowers and make art with it. And then, bird watching, of course you can do this, and you can do everything we're talking about in Australia, just maybe reverse the season. Going into your basement and looking for interesting bugs that are in your basement, or, if you don't have a basement, like in your pantry or under your cabinets or something like that. You can actually find a lot of this, and this kind of touches with what you were talking about with your book, Tony, that there's so many things that are cosmopolitan species, or at least regional, that like, if you go to a basement in Philadelphia, like one time we were having a meeting at my house for a City Nature Challenge, and we just needed a break. And so we all went down to my basement. We're looking for like house centipedes, long-legged cellar spiders, which are species that you find like I think they're I don't even know where they're from originally. Eurasia, I guess, but like now they're all over the world in basements. And so if, I'm sure if you went to someone's basement in any any place you've got a basement that's relatively cool and damp and dark year round, which is what basements are for. You can find a lot of the same species. I don't know, going on about the basement species, but yeah, it's and I I hope it sells well. I'll say no one's going to get rich off of this, but I hope that if it sells pretty well, then that it's something that we can I can keep writing books and get more concepts and topics out there that I hope we all find are interesting. That's
yeah.
fun.
Awesome. I just texted you because I actually have a book that I want to write with McGraw that I won't talk about right now. That I think might actually be really appropriate for Temple, as Mike's also an adjunct there with me. So check your checks.
I saw it. Yeah, I think, and this is one of the things you realize is, I don't know, when I was a kid, like books are these magical things, and like you don't imagine that you could write one. But actually, if you're already writer or used to writing, it's totally doable, and a lot of us are. I mean, Tony, you write wildlife or nature shorts all the time for Parks and Recreation content. Like you teach. This is all stuff that's in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, and let me just bounce something off you. I was talking to my wife about this, and I really want to write a book. I mean, I have several books in mind. Two main ones. Although the wildlife field guide book, I think, could be, several books, depending on, how the publisher wants to play it. But what do you think what's rarer? What's harder to do you think? Or writing? I don't know exactly what you mean by hard to do, but what's more like, I don't know. I'm about to release my third full-length album, right? And it's like, it's on a pretty big label. It's coming out on every format, and this is my third album. My band has put out 3 full-length albums that, on vinyl that have also come out on CD, each one being pressed in multi-thousands. And like, what's more like, I don't know, prestigious. I don't know what's like that I put out to put out records or to put out books. You know what I mean? Like
I think of them very similar, man. I think you can they each can be more or less like effort and laborious depending how you approach them, right? Like the book I wrote is 40 something odd thousand words. It's not that long. And it's pretty simple stuff. As opposed to like some very heavily researched academic work that's a lot longer and is heavily sourced and cited and everything. Whereas, I think like you have albums that people say like they go into the studio and bang it out pretty quick, and then stuff that people spend years working on writing the songs for, and making it more elaborate. So I think it could be. I see it as a tie. It just sort of depends on like what you're doing for each particular one.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like,
with a band, it's collective. It's a multi-person coordination effort also, right? Like you've got, for this one, you have bandmates living in different cities across the country. And it's just right there. You've got a coordination challenge that like when you're writing a book on your own, like it's work, but you're not necessarily coordinating with other people until the latter production parts, which I think would be similar for a record, right?
Yeah, it's weird too, because like it's definitely, that's absolutely true. And although the book I just texted you about, I think would be pretty collaborative. Although the thing is that like there's a difference between like getting a file and like editing it and putting like inserting a chapter into a Word file rather than like having to like sing over like the file someone sent me. You know what I mean? But it is I mean, I guess there's some parallels there. But the one thing, with the book is it's purely intellectual. Your talents are all in your head, like while with the record, you literally, you physically have to. I mean, I know you have to, like, I can't type for shit, and so, for instance, my one of my best friends, the godmother of Azalea, not that we're religious, but well, she fills that role. Friend Catherine, her father was a famous military historian, Russell Weigley, and he wrote all these famous books like the Eisenhower's Lieutenants, A Great Civil War. He wrote one of the best books about the history of Philadelphia, and he also Temple, by the way. He was a history department head, and he's a total legend. Like literally, like a colonel in like full uniform spoke at his funeral. Like when I was there. Like anyway, he wrote all these books, and he just used like I do, use two fingers. Right? So, but with the record, like you actually have to be able to play instruments or make noises in a certain way. You know what I mean? There's like actual like.
But I'd say like writing isn't just about the act of typing. It's about composing sentences and paragraphs and getting your. So I think I'd say that there's a. I don't know. I think that's sort of like. It's.
I think we're saying the same thing. What I'm saying is like, writing is like, I'm saying it doesn't matter if you can't type, because it'll just take longer, but you'll get the words out, right? It's with music. There's ideas in your head that you have to be able to like make into noise, and so you have to like. There's a physical. I'm saying there's a physical
there is
element.
That dimension is definitely you're right.
There's a physical element to it that's not the same. There's no physical element to writing. You know what I mean? Like Stephen Hawking wrote some of the most famous books of ever. So like, and what I'm getting at is like, is that so there's like a whole part of recording music that's like not at all intellectual. It's like you have to, it's like a physical talent or like a physical process.
In a way, it's a craft, and that's
right. So like, and like, so that's like another, and well, some ways it's like another layer of difficulty. It's also like, it also means that if you are able to do that task, then you could produce records and be involved in records, even if you don't have that like intellectual prowess. So it's like, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's just saying they're different in a lot of ways, but like, people who are like complete morons somehow manage to make amazing music. You know what I mean? Like, I know those people, you know what I mean?
Hopefully soon we'll be able to read Tony's book. You can read my book now, and hopefully both of us more books over time. It's a lot of fun. And like,
I'm not just saying this because Billy's one of my best friends. His book is fucking fantastic. And he should be very proud.
It is. I'm proud of it. It's fun. I've got my mom. My mom's out there bugging bookstores to carry it, which I know is a mark of proud parent. But I that kind of radiates back in. So cool. So yeah, please go find it, and hopefully we'll have more books from both of us in time, and keep listening to the Urban Wildlife Podcast. So thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, everybody, and we'll try to get these out more often soon. Cheers.
Cheers.